Because you said the Supreme Court, which is a very broad...
That was your suggestion.
Did I?
Like-
No, I didn't say the Supreme Court.
Yeah, like years ago.
Oh, really?
You said, do you want to come
Yeah,
on my
the first
podcast
time?
to talk about the Supreme Court? And I said, I can't because of my job right now. But we can talk about something else. So I was like, oh, well, now I'm free to talk about
To
that
talk
stuff.
about the Supreme Court. Should we do it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Ladies and gents, welcome back to Articulate with Lydia Ellsworth. How you doing today?
Thank you. I'm wonderful. It's way too hot,
Yes.
but
I agree.
we're moving forward.
We're moving forward. So
Yeah.
last time you weren't allowed to talk about the Supreme Court. Why not?
Because I worked for the federal judiciary, and as a member of the federal, or as an employee of the federal judiciary, you're not allowed to talk about like anything publicly. So you can't express like political beliefs publicly, and you definitely can't be talking about the Supreme Court, which is awful, no good. So
So Supreme Court, from an inside perspective, just give us a, like, I don't know. I guess it's the three branches, right? What are we going to do, a history lesson here?
right,
You're-
we can, yeah, three branches, right?
Three
Good,
branches, the executive, the other one.
Legislative.
Legislative,
Okay, great.
And then the judiciary, which is the
Yes.
Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is apparently supposed to be the one that keeps the other two in check. Well, they're all supposed to be keeping each other in check,
Right,
kind
in
of.
theory.
In theory. But I was looking at it, and the reason that, so the Supreme Court people, they don't, like, get voted. They get,
Appointed.
appointed. That's the word,
Mhm.
yes. Because they're supposed to be free from judgment by, or,
Right, exactly. They're supposed to be insulated from like public opinion.
yeah. Now,
or so.
why do they not have a term limit?
Part of the reason I think is because when the Constitution was written, people didn't live past the age of
so
like
true.
60 ever, and so we're like, well, yeah. I mean, why not? And I think it's the similar idea to having them be insulated from public opinion is like, well, they're independent. They are, once they're appointed, they just get to rock out and do whatever they want. And that's a great idea, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly the reasoning for having them
Okay.
be lifetime appointments. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that
I like the idea
people
that they
weren't
used to
and
die.
also like people weren't being appointed very young back then either.
Right, true.
People usually did it like at the end of their careers.
Yeah, it was like the
and
goal.
when
Isn't
they
the
were, like-
judge, isn't it supposed to be hard to get up that far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people would like be appointed there when they were 60. They have 10 years to live at that point. And then and now you have people being appointed who are in their 40s. So it's like, okay, well,
Probably
That's
a
great, that's
30 years in
great.
here. I was told to ask you some controversial questions, but I'm sure you'll come up with your own opinions because, well, so yeah, give us your background again. So for those who didn't see the last episode, go rewatch it because it's a good one. But also, Lydia's studying to be a lawyer. Is
no,
that
I'm an
okay?
attorney.
You're in
Steve.
you are
yes.
now.
Yes,
current?
I've been for 5
We
years.
haven't. Okay,
Oh
sorry.
my gosh. How insulting.
know.
No, I am an attorney. I went to Villanova Law School, and I worked for the judiciary, first in New York, and then for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which is like one step below the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And now I work for a legal aid organization, and I represent people who are being evicted.
Oh, cool. Did you have any run-ins with like court cases and stuff when you were younger or anything like that?
Oh,
people you knew go to jail or anything like
No, well, like when I lived in, have you heard of Kids for Cash?
that? No.
Okay, so basically it was this big circle of corruption in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, like Wilkes-Barre, and this guy named Miracle, he was a big developer.
Mhm.
He developed, among other things, like juvenile institutions. So he built those buildings, and then he had an agreement with two judges, Chivarella and Conahan. And so they would get kickbacks for every juvenile that they sent to
Oh,
in
wow.
placement to those, like, every kid they sent to juvie, essentially.
Right. Close to my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So isn't that terrible?
Yeah. It is
So
really messed up.
they are in prison right now.
Oh, sweet. All right.
Yeah, it eventually was found out. It was very obvious what was going on. I mean, I was a child, so, but anyway. But when I was a kid, Judge Chivarella would come to our school and be like, if you mess up, you will be locked up. And like, they were not empty threats at all. Like, kids got sent to like to juvie and like juvie camps and stuff like that. Were you
Mhm.
at like what was the
It was a
institution you were at?
yeah,
Was
juvenile
it
correction
it was
facility.
yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't because there was two parts. They had like a rehab camp
Yeah.
that people
Okay.
stayed for much longer.
Yeah.
But then they did have like the correctional facility,
Okay,
which I
got
was
you.
in.
Yeah. So kids were studying either like to the facilities or to the camps
Mhm.
for like having a cell phone in school.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was like
Whoa.
really severe. Like
How
it was
long ago was it?
probably 2008, 2000 to the
Dang.
2000s, like 2000, 2008.
Yeah, it was just BlackBerry type, and they weren't even doing any games on their
No,
phone
no,
or
no, no.
anything like
They had a
that.
flip phone, and the flip phone buzzed, and they're like,
You're going to juvie.
yeah.
Okay. So you just heard about the story, or you knew somebody that went to juvie, or
Yeah, so well, the threat of the law was always very present to me because I genuinely like took it to heart when he was like, "You will be locked up," and I was like, "Shit, if I ever mess up, like I am going to jail."
yeah. Which is why you went to Christian Catholic school.
Yes, exactly. I was like, "Well, no one's catching me doing anything here."
Right.
Yeah, so I was aware of the law in like the vaguest sense there. I never knew any attorneys no attorneys in my family. I never knew them growing up. So it wasn't I never thought there was something that like I could do.
Then what made you do it?
When I was in college, I had a professor who he was like taking a break from being an attorney and he did like poverty law. And so he was one of my professors. He taught class social inequality and I was like, whoa, this stuff is sick. Well, that's actually very sad.
Right, but it's invigorating.
Yeah, and he talked
engaging.
about what he did and I was like, oh wait, that actually sounds like a way to help people while using the law and that sounds cool.
Right. The Supreme Court specifically, when have you had, I don't know, I don't know, how involved is that in the study, I guess?
It's
Because that's like the top of the top, like you said, like that's where the cases go.
They make the law of the land.
Right.
In law school, you like spend a lot of time learning about like, reading their decisions and stuff like that. In practice, depending what you do, so when I worked for the federal judiciary, obviously that was very relevant. I don't have to think about it as much now, except it's for everybody. Unfortunately, there is always a lot to talk about because they are making decisions that take our rights away, etc.
Yeah. I heard
So
there was
it's
the president is king now. Is that true?
right. No. Aw.
That's what I don't know. I just see these headlines all the time
I know.
about the Supreme Court, and I'm like, there's 3 branches to even. They can't all. It's not that bad, right? The situation with the Supreme Court, they're not
Right. So
making.
in theory, no,
Yes.
it's not that bad. The
Okay.
problem is that there's been gridlock in Congress for I don't know. It feels like the last 20 years.
Mm.
So because the idea is if all the like, branches are working properly, they can check each other. So like if the Supreme Court did something crazy, Congress could just like make a law and say no. Like
Yes.
they could either like modify what
There's no
the Supreme
king. You're not
Court
allowed to have a
said
king, right?
exactly, but Congress like isn't going to do that because they haven't been able to pass laws in forever.
Why not?
Well, there's a lot of, I guess, like underlying reasons, but just like the split in so it's like there's a lot of polarization, right, between like Democrats and the Republicans.
Right.
So getting them to come together on anything, it's just like hasn't
Okay.
happened,
And so they can't agree to make any laws.
Right.
Okay.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Supreme Court is making these decisions within the Supreme Court and not being contested because nobody can agree on how they can contest them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the Republicans figured out before the Democrats. Because there's been polarization and gridlock in Congress for a while now, and the Republicans were like, hold on. The Supreme Court isn't subject to term limits, public opinion, and they could do whatever they want. So if we just control that, and it's anti-majoritarian, right? So even if 75, this isn't true, but if 75% of the country is, left-leaning, as long as the Supreme Court is majority right-leaning, then that's all you need.
Yeah.
It's very smart.
I mean, do they put limits on who can be in the Supreme Court? Like within their, I mean, so it could just be all right wing or conservative, or it could be
Yeah.
all liberal. It could be all liberal people.
Right, yeah. So it totally depends on when people resign, like die or
Mhm.
resign.
That's why I heard RBG was a big controversy because she could have resigned
Right.
during it.
Also, we could have elected a Democrat president instead of Trump. So,
So
but
true.
you know,
Yeah.
but no, you're right. So, yeah, it's not like every president has the right to elect 2 justices or something like that. It totally
Right.
depends on, when people decide to resign. And of course, like when things are so polarized, the Republican justices are not going to resign when there's a Democratic president, vice versa.
And again, can we actually break down this whole this whole king thing where presidents can't get arrested or whatever that is?
Yeah. Truthfully, I didn't read the opinion. I've listened to summaries of it.
Okay.
And my understanding it's going to be very hard to say that something that the president did while he was president was an unofficial act. But to give you background about the Supreme Court justices who wrote that opinion, they include, or I guess maybe didn't write the opinion but joined it or concurred with it, because there's a system. It's like there's a majority opinion. You could write a concurring opinion, which means I agree. My vote counts towards the 5 needed to uphold or whatever, but I'm going to say something a little bit different, or you could dissent.
Okay.
Yes, those justices include Clarence Thomas, whose wife participated in the January 6th
Insurrection
rally. Yeah.
All right. That's a fact.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And also included Sam Alito, whose wife was recently flying flags in their LBI home that were flown at by the January 6ers. So it was the upside down American flag.
Okay.
And one with a pine tree,
it's very
which
creative.
they were also carrying. I don't know. So
and
Clarence Thomas also famously accused of sexual assault
Okay.
by Anita Hill.
So
Brett Kavanaugh also accused of sexual assault, famously. Let's keep going. Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed very unfairly. Do you remember when Obama tried to appoint Neil Gorsuch?
I don't.
Oh, okay. So Obama was president, right?
Sure. That's a fact. He was the president.
Amen. He was president. He tried to appoint Neil Gorsuch. Mitch McConnell said, "Fuck you. We don't have to just because we're in control right now." And so instead of having Neil Gorsuch appointed, they didn't appoint anyone because they wouldn't give them a hearing, and then Trump appointed Neil Gorsuch.
Wow! So they literally just chose to not have that seat
because it was too close to the election. Okay, so skip ahead 4 years. RBG dies. It's a month away from the election, and Mitch McConnell says, "No, it's okay. We're gonna put Amy Coney Barrett up." So yeah, all of these people are really problematic. And have been illegitimately appointed.
Again, so who manages these people? Who you said Mitch McConnell, what is his position?
He was the leader. It was the Senate majority.
The Senate majority. Okay, so the Senate is supposed to be the people.
Yeah, the Senate the Senate votes ultimately too. Because the president nominates them, the Senate votes. Yes or no.
Okay, so it's the president who's appointing people.
Yeah.
Who is firing people?
So the only way to get rid of them is to impeach them.
And that has to be done through the Senate?
The House and the Senate, yeah. It's the same as the president.
Okay.
Like how Trump was impeached good times.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Well, and so when was the last time somebody got impeached?
I don't know that a Supreme Court justice has ever been impeached. I think a lower court judge has been impeached, but yeah. So... And, okay, everything we talked about already is bad. Didn't even mention that Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito have received, millions of dollars in undisclosed gifts from people who, have business before the Supreme Court. Yeah. There's, a guy who, has a hedge fund that is always, before the Supreme Court. He takes Sam Alito on his private jet. And they go to the Adirondacks and stay at
you know this guy's name?
No. Harlan Crow is the one who is the financier of Clarence Thomas.
Okay.
And I think bought his mom's house and pays for his nephew to go to private school every year.
This is crazy. So This is always what I suspected. All right, this is always what. Can we talk about voting for a second? Can
Hmm.
we talk about voting on a national scale here? Because have you ever heard of Adam Curtis before? Adam Curtis, he's a documentarian. Anyways,
Mm-mm.
he creates these narratives through the BBC archives
Mm-hmm.
that document basically the historical fact of what has happened regarding like American culture. I mean, international cultures, but also like what's been happening politically. And basically, what he's come to is the tie of, especially after the gold standard got wiped out in the early '90s, the rise of computers and algorithms to manage money, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, if it's just numbers, you can just change numbers, right? So that led to people just having insane amounts of money to do whatever they wanted to do,
Okay,
right?
gotcha. Yeah.
And in this case, that it's basically what I'm trying to bring it back to is within the whole like presidency and the whole voting. i- i- do we even have like a say in any decisions made at the top level, really? Or is it just rich people who are lobbying and giving unwarranted gifts that
Yeah.
are
I
really
mean,
controlling
money
everything?
is speech. The Supreme Court decided that.
Y-
Actually.
when was this?
2002 maybe? That
Okay.
was a case called Buckley versus Vallejo.
And
And
what
they
was
said
the
money is speech. And it's like, well, that's crazy because I don't have that much money.
yeah.
Do I not have as much speech
Yeah,
as
yeah,
anybody
yeah.
else? Like that's the natural
Whoa.
conclusion.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, it is kind of a fucked situation. Cuz
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely seems like um how am I supposed to like possibly supposed to compete with people who can directly influence people in
In the
very
Supreme
very high in the government,
yeah.
directly influence them where it's like
Right.
but
I mean, we even set standards like a Roe v. Wade, and then didn't that just get overturned like
yes.
last year?
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
like that was done below the Supreme Court, and then once it reaches the Supreme Court, then the money just gets pumped into it, and the final decision gets made that way. Or I mean, I might be simplifying it too much.
Yeah, it's well, yeah, either way it's not like uplifting necessarily, right?
Right. Right.
I think the good things are that we do have like collective power,
Hmm.
right? And I think that if the left understands the value in like the Supreme Court and the judiciary as much as the right already does, then you know that could be because so many people I think voted for Donald Trump because they liked him or were excited for him to be president at all, but they knew the value in that he would add to like making lifetime appointments to the judiciary because
Mm.
so much and it's worked very well lately, right? Roe versus Wade was overturned. They're like really bad like Second Amendment cases. It's working quite well. They have a 6-3 majority.
Hmm.
So I think if people start valuing that or understanding the value of that,
Hmm.
that could be a positive
Yeah.
a
So your
positive
focus is
force.
well, and also you said you kind of just skipped over it. We have collective power. Can you explain that a little bit too?
Right. So I don't have a lot of money. You probably don't have a lot of money,
Right.
you know.
Hey,
Um
that's fine. Hey, wait a minute.
just kidding. Steve's rich.
This isn't
Um
in a basement underground.
but George Soros has a lot of money, right?
Hmm.
There are, like the ACLU gets a lot of money.
Hmm.
There are plenty of like rich enough left people that we probably don't agree with everything on,
Hmm.
right? But that we could all like get together and say, okay, is Kamala the number one person I want to see in office? No. Is it worth fighting really hard and supporting her to prevent the judiciary from becoming permanently fucked?
Hmm.
Yes.
So that's an easy decision for you as
Yeah,
a
that's my
liberal.
perspective.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
understand the other arguments
The arguments
too.
against Kamala.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Or just against like a more whatever like whoever the more status quo
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
like not left enough person
Well,
is.
again, as I kind of come back to the idea of this, that I just don't like either of them, and I know that there's reasons for and against both of them.
Mhm.
But my thing is, this is an argument that was brought up around the first time Trump was up for election, basically.
Mhm.
And it was after he won, and there was this big argument about, left versus right, and the whole the classic debate of,
Mm.
elephant versus donkey, and uh, and basically the guy says he's like, okay, listen, if Trump wins, that's what the American people wanted, like that's what, and if that is not true, right? Say or say that we don't want either of them.
Mhm.
Most people don't want either of them.
Mhm.
Then he said, then there is a way, like, for the people to uprise and change the system. Basically, his point is that there is a way to change the system, but we don't. We actively choose not to do it. Is
Oh
that
yeah,
true?
absolutely, right? It'd be one thing if Trump won and 100% of the country voted.
Right.
I think 20% of the country voted like it
Yeah.
wasn't close, right? So
Yeah.
it's a lot
Yeah.
of people who for whatever reason like aren't compelled to vote.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's just about making it matter to people,
Hmm.
right? And I
Well,
think
is that
if
the only? Again, if you don't like both candidates, what's the system change that needs to happen there? Getting everybody to vote for the independent person?
right. Well, I mean, you could cuz the primary is when the like respective candidates are chosen.
Right.
So ideally like getting people engaged in the primary.
Okay.
And I mean, no one's ever going to be happy with one candidate, right?
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
it's no one's ever going to get 100% of the vote.
Hmm.
I think with our generation, it's been so much of like picking candidates that seem underwhelming to us.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know. I eventually think that will change, and like we'll
Hmm.
eventually get somebody. But I like that could start now, right?
Hmm.
Like there are people like doing good stuff who like, can run for office. I know like Bernie Sanders was huge to a lot of people,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of people were disillusioned when he didn't get the nomination as to Joe Biden. But
Hmm.
there are plenty like Bernies in the future who like are a little bit younger, and
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I think that it's easy to kind of wait until the very end or like things are already set in stone and be like these people suck.
Right. It's easy to
Yeah.
to have hindsight in the
Right, but
moment.
it's also hard to like keep up with everything
Right.
and be
Right.
keyed in. So I'm not like being critical of anyone. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
there's
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where I wanted to go next. Is like, again, I am not super political. I don't watch the news a lot. I try not
mhm.
to actively
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But basically, there's always these arguments that the next president is going to be the one to end the world, whether it be conservative or liberal. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And somebody pointed out to me is like when it was now it's Kamala, but when it was Joe Biden and Trump,
Mhm.
um, he was like, yeah, everybody's worried it's going to be one of the two, but we've already had both of them, and we've made it to here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So somebody who kind of sees those bigger moves, I guess, and understand. I think you just maybe not more than. I would say more than the general public. I feel like you understand what's happening a little bit better because of your, foot in the. Would you agree with that? Your foot in the door.
I mean, yeah. I know what you're saying. There are things that we recognize the president as doing as in the moment,
Hmm.
and then there are ways that their presidency is going to impact future like many years to come,
Right,
right?
right. So yeah, the first question was, would you agree that you understand a little bit more about what's happening at the top than the general
Oh,
population?
sure.
Okay, and then the second question is, is the world going to end here? Like, what's happening?
I'm concerned about a lot. I'm concerned about Russia. I'm concerned about China. I
Okay,
feel
so
like if they want to start war, then I don't know how much that the American president is going to influence that though.
okay, so it's more so less about the internal qualms that we have as a country, and mm,
Yeah,
less
although
so
I
about that,
mean,
and more
I
so about.
think I think Donald Trump is insane.
So he might
But
start a war just for funsies.
yeah, I was so sure that was going to happen when he was president last time. But I think there might be enough like people around him to
To stop a shooter? No, not that one. Not that one at all.
that was crazy.
Yeah. But there might be enough people around him now to keep him level-headed.
Be like,
or
yeah, like, you
hey,
cannot,
man,
you
don't press that
cannot,
button.
you cannot touch the button
Don't
right
press
now.
the button.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the hope, at least. I don't know. I just try not to think about. But okay, so big picture.
Right,
Going back
right.
to the judiciary.
Yeah.
Like,
Within our
Donald
internal
Trump,
system.
yeah, like
is
Donald
kind of what I'm
Trump. Yeah,
asking.
Donald Trump he appointed like a 30-year-old like judge to a lifetime appointment in Florida, I think. That's going to like impact that part of like federal law for a long time to come. Biden actually understood the like impetus to appoint a lot of people to the federal bench as well, and he did a decent job of that. So good job, Joe.
Okay.
So the next, and that's going to continue, right? The next president is going to have an opportunity to, like, to continue contributing to that in ways that will last a while. Yeah. So that's.
You don't see it swinging too far one way or the other that we come to a fascist state or anything like that.
Like civil. Oh.
Like civil war.
Like civil war.
Yeah. These are hot topic questions.
I know. I wasn't really prepared to.
Okay. Also, you can refuse to answer any of these. And also, I have no opinion on any of them.
No,
either, so.
I myself am so adverse to like let's revolt like thing that I can't see it happening.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It like is scary to think about all the different things that could happen. Project 2025.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. But
so I don't know.
Okay, but within the Supreme Court, you can see that.
So as long as like the 3 relatively young liberal justices hang on 4 years, then I don't think it would get any worse. Like kind of damage was already done with like his last term. Although no, it could get worse actually because there are like several like old justices now, right? Like Clarence Thomas is pretty old, Sam Alito is old. They will resign while Trump is still in office, so he could replace them with a 30-year-old who is not going to die for a very long time.
Okay, so it could get a lot worse.
So yeah, it could get worse.
Yeah.
So
See,
everyone,
to me, I try not to choose sides, but I just like the balance. And to me, it's when there's an imbalance that it's scary.
I know, right? Because the thing about balance is that the idea is that you'll end up like with an even result, right? Or like you'll catch the like like there'll just be outlier cases, but everything else, like all you need is one person who's like going to be reasonable to be like, no, that's that's too much. But the other problem is that I don't know, they're just so unreasonable. Additionally, they're like they are MAGA people. It's
yeah.
That's not a normal person.
Yeah. Well, we could get into that, but I'm not going to get into the psychology of people.
I know. Do you want to hear a funny story about the Supreme Court?
Sure. Yes, please.
Okay. So back in like the mid to late 60s, there were a lot of cases about obscenity. So states would criminalize obscenity, and it would be like if you like published a pornography or something like that.
Oh yeah, wasn't this George Carlin kind of spearheaded this because of the 7 words you can't say on
kind
TV?
Of, yeah. People, I don't know, whoever would like make pornos, it was criminalized, so like they would get like charged with whatever by the state, and then they would appeal. Like they would say, it's like First Amendment protected. And so the Supreme Court at one point had a lot of cases, like obscenity cases like that, where people were being tried criminally for putting out porn. And so the Supreme Court had to review these cases. I mean, it chose to review the cases because they need to vote to take their cases. The rule is if 4 people vote to take a case, then they hear it. So they were interested in taking all these pornography cases.
Sure.
And they had like an ad hoc system of reviewing them. So they would have movie day, and they would like watch the pornos in the basement of the Supreme Court, and
decide.
I think there would be popcorn and everything.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah, and which in itself is like horrifying, funny. But there was also one of the justices was like had really bad eyesight.
Oh, okay.
And so someone had to like narrate everything that was happening. And I think he was hard of hearing too, so they would be like yelling, like, and now she's
Yeah. That's awesome.
So yeah, that's
What was the ruling on that one?
They eventually
I mean, we have
they
porn
eventually
today, so
changed the standard. So yeah.
But you're not allowed to do certain. They were watching the porn, like, oh no, we can't. She can't do that. in there. Yeah, no.
Yeah, well,
She did what? Okay. They came back out with rules.
because all they had to do was like put a no Vietnam poster in the background. And they'd be
Okay.
like, see, like they're making a social statement, so that's First Amendment protected.
Yeah.
So
That's funny. So then it's like, all right, what really is the rule? Yeah, where is this going? Cool.
yeah, so those were funnier times. The Supreme Court used to be really good, right?
It used to be.
Yeah,
When was the fall off?
when Nixon was appointed as
Sure,
president.
sure.
So
As most things in
course.
America
Yeah.
start to fall apart.
Yeah, no. It's called the Warren Court, and all of the good things that we know about the law really came from them, like Brown versus Board of Education,
Mm-hmm.
the Miranda rights that
Mm.
people are read on TV.
Yeah.
They said you have to read those to people who are being arrested. Yeah, a lot of good stuff, and Nixon was like, that's terrible, and it hasn't been that liberal since.
That liberal sense, yeah. That stinks. But as a liberal, what would you describe some of the positives of the conservative judge?
Which conservative judge?
I would say the ideal conservative judge.
Okay, so to me, the ideal conservative judge doesn't go beyond the bounds of like what's before them, right? Because some of the Supreme Court justices now will be like, no, you don't have the right to do that. Also, fuck you for even asking me. Also, like, go Trump, right? An exaggeration, obviously.
Sure.
But they're just doing way too much, and they're like ready to they're ready to bring up things that haven't been raised.
Their decision is already,
Yeah, exactly.
It's already made.
So the ideal conservative judge just like looks at what's going on before them, considers everything, right? I think the ideal judge period,
Right.
comes in not with an idea of I want to do this or I want to do that, but considers the question. Because this is what I did when I was, in the judiciary. I looked up the law. I read. I did the little research, and I looked up the laws, and I said, "Oh, it seems like the law says this."
Right.
It's not always that easy, obviously, especially cases that the Supreme Court gets could be very opaque, and it's like, what does this like portion of the Constitution that there's no explanation to mean? I think at that point you do have to decide like, how am I going to interpret this? Am I going to consider what is going on today and like the reality of things today, right? Or do I want to be like regressive and consider what was happening when the Constitution was written?
Well, yeah, you know how you would look up the law if you were in that situation? Is they probably think they know the law, but they're really just referencing something that they knew, 20 years ago, and
yeah, well, a
making
lot of
decisions based
it,
off of that.
a lot of it is just what they want the law to like mean in practicality, right? Sometimes you have to kind of be practical about things, but you don't always have to be. And I think, and the judges say that they don't, right? The John Roberts, the Chief Justice, is like, we just call balls and strikes. We don't think about anything else. Like, we don't think about the implications of the decisions. One, you should think about the implications of your decisions.
Right. Yeah.
Two, that's a lie, right? And it'd be one thing if they said like, if a judge puts out an opinion and is like, this is unclear, I'm voting this way because I think it's better. Okay, then you're putting that out into the world and everyone knows what it is. But that's not, they never say that, right? They say like, oh, this is how it has to be because this is what the founders probably thought back then. Nobody knows what they thought back then.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
not
yeah.
a historian. Even if you were, who gives a, like,
Just give us your opinion and tell us why you think that.
yeah, exactly. And if it's because I think that social justice warriors are evil and I, want things to be like they were back in the 50s, then like have that be your opinion so everyone can criticize it and be aware of what's going on.
Just be open about your corruption, all right?
Yeah,
It's like, I'm
exactly.
voting this way because I got $100,000
Yeah,
gift.
because I really like this guy's private
Yeah.
jet.
Damn. Would you ever want to be on the Supreme Court one day?
I don't like federal law as much.
Or not? Because of all the Hot topics?
No, I mean federal law is mostly boring. Like
Mm,
it's mostly Supreme Court. Like they get the exciting cases,
sure.
but yes, federal law is mostly, um, I don't know, statutes and stuff like that. I think that state law is generally more interesting because when like common people have lawsuits, they bring them in state court. Like they usually bring them in like federal court, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And those are the more interesting ones because you get the people.
Yeah. Like I want to do a case about a 32 car pileup because there was this massive like snow drift that happened on the way to the airport. You know,
Yeah.
I think cases like that are cool.
Yeah, where a lot of people got hurt and maybe died.
I think they're interesting.
Okay,
Is what I should have said.
Yeah, no, that's
But yeah,
cool.
I would like to be a state court judge
State court judge, really, one day.
one
What's
day.
how long? When and can
Not for a long time.
get you gifts? And can I get you? Hey, remember when you were on my podcast? You remember? I have this guy. That's my friend. I'm the friend, and I accidentally murdered somebody. What do you do?
You accidentally murdered somebody.
On accident,
I
yeah.
would have to recuse because I'm going to be an honorable judge.
Okay.
That's the thing is that the Supreme Court justices also don't have like a code of ethics they have to abide by.
Really?
Right. Correct. And there's no one that enforces it either.
But state judges do.
Yes. So I, as an employee of the judiciary, like we said at the top, like I wasn't allowed to discuss any, like I wasn't allowed to donate like to certain places. I wasn't allowed to discuss like politics in any like open forum. I like had a lot of rules. Like I was supposed to like not get gifts or like participate in like certain activities. I was a nobody nothing. My name was never anywhere. These people at the
Right.
most powerful people in the judiciary don't have to do shit. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. And then you said there's nobody enforcing. There's no code of ethics, and there's nobody enforcing it either. That's kind
Right.
of what I was asking at the beginning. It's also like, who is? All right, I guess there's people appointing it, but nobody's doing anything with these people beyond that. There's
No, like
besides this impeachment, this mystical impeachment, which never
right,
happens.
which hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Right. There's been just recently a ton of reporting by ProPublica about all of the corrupt things that these people have been up to, and it's breathtaking.
Well, maybe that is the good thing about today is that, I mean, there's still a lot of misinformation, I think, with the internet and whatnot, but there's also, just a lot more information coming to light, and these people are more subject to, a microscopic lens on, what they're doing outside of just their job. So, while they're still doing those things, you know what I mean? I think some of them might understand the severity of that, of that lens on them at all times a little bit more and start to make decisions accordingly. Hopefully, right?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. So, yeah, it's kind of bleak, but
It's
we can
kind of
make it
bleak,
better.
but there's always hope. Yeah, and we can make it better. And I think another thing that was funny is that you were talking about looking forward to older judges, or like you said, the disagreeing with the older judges on the Supreme Court right now. Whereas, like, as we get older, we might find that we agree with some of them.
We might
as
Steve,
no
don't.
as like
We're
the
gonna
younger
turn
ones
into
get it.
the curmudgeons.
Yeah.
No, I already feel like that in some ways.
Yeah,
Some
yeah,
things
yeah,
that Gen Z does, I'm just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
I feel like such a curmudgeon.
But that's what I'm saying is like you just say once we're 50 and there's a 50-year-old on the Supreme Court, you could be like, all right, you know what I mean? You can view it a little differently, right?
Yeah. Well, we're definitely in a gerontocracy right now.
Oh, what?
Gerontocracy, society run by old people.
Gerontocracy? Is that the word for that?
Yeah. Like
Okay.
geriatric.
Oh, okay. I was thinking gerrymandering for some reason, which is also bad.
There we
but
go.
For other reasons.
Related, yeah.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, we're in a phase, I think.
But Kamala, so young, so youthful.
Right. Right, yeah. Well, anyways, I think that's probably what's the happy thing that from the Supreme? Can we end on a high note? I tried to do it.
Can we? That's a great question. The Supreme Court recently made a decision. So there was this really bad decision about the Second Amendment that's like, if there wasn't a law specifically, so basically, if you wanted to uphold a restriction on owning guns, you'd have to point to a corollary, so like a similar law at the time the Constitution was written or at the time that the amendment was passed, which is like those don't exist. Great. So, but then recently they made a decision upholding the criminalization of people owning, like, against people owning guns who have like PFAs against them or were like domestic violence abusers. So that was good.
Okay, so now if you
I
have
was
a
really
criminal
afraid that I
record-
was so certain that was going to be like, nope, that's fine. They could own guns situation.
Criminal
So
record is you're not allowed to have an intense criminal record to get a gun.
right. So I think it was a question of like, okay, they don't have a criminal record, but is this like protection like from abuse order?
Okay.
Right, because you could. It's kind of. I think it's like almost a civil thing in nature, right? Because you could just get a PFA against somebody fairly easily, right? So yeah,
Okay.
I was so sure that was going to be a.
But it didn't.
Yeah.
So
that's
it's fine,
good.
and there's hope, right?
Yeah.
There's things could keep going. A-okay, we're still
It's
here.
gonna be great.
We're still making podcasts and surviving the heat and drinking water, and that's really, thank you.
Cheers.
Water, cheers.
Water.
This is great. No, it's fine. I think we'll be all right. We're powerhouses, and if
No, there
anything
are
needs to be
plenty of
changed-
paths forward.
That's what I'm saying. Is like I think if anything were to get severely, like off of, if the pendulum were to go one direction entirely, I think people would put their thinking caps on and move things the right direction.
Right.
Yeah, that's what my opinion. I would do something, right?
There you go.
Would you do something?
I don't know what you mean by something, but sure.
Sure. Yeah. If you had to be an activist in a situation where you thought activism was needed, would you be that?
Yeah.
Well, then it's fine. We're fine.
Right. I'm moving to Alaska. but
Okay.
that's a different story.